Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett from The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Okie dokie. There's a lot that is going on in the news. I know it, you know it. But the biggest thing that has come to pass is, without a doubt, the window in the Democrat plan to be any kind of decent opposition to the Trump administration has in fact closed. And when I mean decent, I want to make this, incredibly clear here. Decent doesn't mean morally decent. Decent doesn't mean looking towards the future kind of decent. Decent doesn't mean bright, sunshiny weather kind of decent. No. When I say that the Democrats have missed their opportunity to provide a decent opposition to the Trump administration, that comes in one form and one form alone: effective at their jobs. Now, it's Congress, right? So you would think that Congress could be effective. Well, absolutely not. We all know Congress is terrible at anything and everything. But in the last month, there was a kind of decent opportunity for Trump's opposition to oppose. Trump had started a trade war that his administration on the inside disagreed about. Also, the stock market didn't like it. Whenever you mix foreign policy and the economy and the high stakes diplomacy that the Trump administration regularly throws in, you get into some rather testy ground here, because the stock market didn't like the idea of a lot of unstable footing and tariff policies, and no one knew whether or not that was going to be a high leverage situation, or whether that was going to be permanent policy, because Howard Lutnick would get out in front of the country and say one thing, Peter Navarro would get out in front of the country and babble underwater, and then Scott Bessent would get out in front of the country and say something completely different. And so there was a small window of opportunity in which the Trump administration was a little more vulnerable, really, than they ever had been in the second administration so far. It was made a slight bit worse when the Trump administration had admitted very briefly to two small errors. One being that Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic got inside of a Signal group chat message right before a strike on the Houthis, which was successful. That was one error. And error number two was that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an MS-13 gang member who had been living for the last 15 years in Maryland, beating his wife and endangering their children, well, it turned out that the United States deported him early, a little earlier than they were supposed to. And so with those two administrative errors and the economy in turmoil, the Democrats had the floor wide open, because Republicans are not necessarily great at keeping momentum going. So what did they do? Did they actually take the opportunity? Nope. They did not. They didn't press Trump on the economy. They started releasing articles about eggs, which were coming down. They started talking about weird healthcare stuff and making up rumors that Medicare and Medicaid were going to shut their doors and veterans were going to be without any benefits and everyone was going to die. That didn't happen. And did they talk about the tariff and the trade war stuff at all? Well, kind of. Not in any effective way whatsoever. So to be clear, the reason I say that this was really the height of opportunity, the widest the window could be open for the Democrats, in that first 100 days of the administration, when you get near the end of that first 100 days, really in the third month, you start to see initial opinions of the administration crystallize. And then after the first 100 days of an administration, you get into the second quarter of the year and things start to move again. So Fox News had a poll from April 7th to April 23rd, which asked about approval ratings for the Trump administration. And it is at the lowest approval rating and the highest disapproval rating for Trump that he's ever experienced on the Fox News side of things. It is the highest it was the 55% disapproval rating. It's the highest disapproval rating in the recent presidencies of presidents going into their second term. And so there's a lot of opportunity here, because now the polling window has closed. Polling always lags. Did the Democrats take the opportunity on tariffs? No, they did sort of talk about tariffs. What did they talk about? They said, well, it's not that we don't like tariffs, because there's all these clips of Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talking about how much they love tariffs and trade protectionism, and Bernie Sanders talking about how we have to have tariffs on everyone. Even my cousin down the street, I don't like him. Put tariffs on him right now. I mean, you had all of these Democrats who had already praised tariffs. And the unions used to be the biggest voting bloc of the Democrats. Well, they can't come out and just slam tariffs, because the UAW, the Teamsters, All of the unions were the most in favor of the Trump tariffs. So what did they do? They basically did like the nagging wife maneuver. Well, it's not what you said. It's just how you said it. That was the approach. And then they made mountains out of molehills. So they made mountains out of molehills regarding the Pete Hegseth, who has been a very effective Secretary of Defense so far. Army has already met its recruitment retention numbers, and it's only March. Or excuse me, it's at the end of April for the entire year. They hit the official number for the year in March. Recruitment and retention have increased dramatically. Also, successful strikes on terrorists without telegraphing them to the rest of the world before they take place. And the media decided to go all in on the group chat scandal and then all in on Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So even now, you have, for example, Governor Tim Walz, the failed vice presidential candidate from Minnesota, who has decided to just stick his head up the rain gutter of failure by crying about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and mischaracterizing him, to which the Democrats in the Minnesota State House gave thunderous applause. Goober stuff.
Now, in this land of the free and home of the brave, we have university students being swept up, shoved into unmarked vans, and fathers being tossed into Salvadorian gulags without a hint of due process. So I want to be real clear about this. If you say you love freedom, but you don't believe freedom is for everybody, then the thing you love isn't freedom, it's privilege.
Okay, so a couple of small McNotes about that. Number one, I love the way that we're describing Garcia over on the left side of the aisle. That's real nice. They're just throwing fathers into, these gulags. Oh, just throwing them in, just throwing these. I don't remember anyone describing any of the January 6th rioters as fathers. You hear that, huh? No, they were these domestic terrorists, these evil, terrible, horrible people. Throw them away forever. Lock them away. Throw the key down the throat of Rosie O'Donnell. It'll never be seen again. No, now that there's an illegal immigrant who has got MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles and whose wife said that he was endangering their child, like all good fathers do, in a protective order request. Now Tim Walz is like, oh, they're throwing these fathers away. Oh, my goodness. And then you've got the DNC, who's so busy with infighting, so busy ripping each other to shreds, that the Democrats can't even mount a unified offensive. So much so that you have senators like Dick Durbin of Illinois who are just like throwing in the towel, like, screw it, I'm done. The party's not working. Nobody's working. You've got Democrats in the House in Illinois and other states that are just canceling their reelection campaigns. One of the key reasons is because David Hogg, who appears to be a love child between a stick figure and Ellen DeGeneres, decided as the new vice chair of the DNC that the best move would be throwing $20 million into an effort to unseat incumbent Democrats, which, if you know nothing about the internal political structure of like how you do campaigns, that's not just suicide. That's like Jonestown level mass suicide for the party. And then Ken, who is this random Democrat from Minnesota who they made the new chair of the DNC, actually had to go on TV and like backhand his own vice chair because it was ripping the country in half, or excuse me, ripping the DNC in half, two very different things.
And we lost voting shares with every single demographic except predominantly older voters and highly educated voters. That is a huge problem. And what we're trying to do here is not just focus on primaries where there's potentially an older incumbent, but more than anything, an ineffective person in that position, and replace them with a generational leader to build the future of our party.
Let me be unequivocal. No DNC officer should ever attempt to influence the outcome of a primary election, whether on behalf of an incumbent or a challenger. If you want to challenge incumbents, you're more than free to do that, but just not as an officer of the DNC, because...
So they've given him an ultimatum. This infighting is insane. So that said, what does that mean for the Republican side of things? If the window is shut, what are the Republicans doing? Because the Trump administration has changed almost everything in the last week. And is the DNC even going to be able to talk about that? No, because they have a major, major lawsuit coming. We're going to talk about that in just a second. We're going to send the radio folks over to commercial first. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. So in the meantime, while the Democrats are now getting ready to be hit with, well, not getting ready, they have been hit with a major lawsuit. It's fantastic. And additional lawsuits against groups like Act Blue, the grassroots foreign gift card exchange for political groups on the left. Stacey Abrams' crew is under investigation. You have Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, allegedly committing the same kind of mortgage fraud she prosecuted Trump over. It's not looking good. What are the Republicans doing? Well, in the last week, the Department of Defense has started scrubbing out all of these isolationist individuals who are so angry that the Trump administration isn't going to lick the boots of Iran like Barack Obama did. That they've started leaking information to the New York Times, which I don't know if you guys know about this, but leaking information to journalistic outlets as the Department of Defense, historically not a great thing to have in the DoD. So they're getting rid of those. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the Trump administration, you have Tom Homan, the border czar, who is now moving through, basically bobbing and weaving these injunctions and continuing to go after illegal immigrants in this country who have committed criminal activities. The Trump administration is actually winning a decent series of Supreme Court cases and has a great lineup heading to SCOTUS this summer that is going to crystallize in the eyes of the country, of course, but also in federal law and how it's applied, on how various aspects of the federal judicial authority and jurisdiction are supposed to interact with the executive branch, which has really not been settled by the Supreme Court for nigh on a century. Additionally, the Trump administration is now allowing Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, to drive the economic bus. Finally, telling Howard Lutnick and especially Peter Navarro to go shut up and sit in a corner while Scott Bessent organizes trade deals between the United States and Japan, the United States and South Korea, between the United States and Taiwan, not to mention Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, looking over at India as well, J.D. Vance negotiating a trade deal there. You're going to get into some really interesting territory really quick where China's going to be boxed in whether they make a deal with the United States or not. And in the last 3 days, we have seen the NASDAQ, which does a lot of the international commodities trading, has gained 2% each day over the last 3 days. That's only happened 2 other times in history. So what are we looking at moving forward? That leaves the immigration issue and the judicial issue in front of the American public, which the Democrats didn't hit the Republicans on effectively. J.D. Vance has basically waltzed out in front of the public now and has put the due process issue effectively to rest. It's a really strong argument, and it is, in fact, going to resonate with Americans. Check it out.
Omar Abrego Garcia's wife has been very vocal about how she doesn't think he's getting due process, and she now also fears for her safety. Do you have a message to her specifically?
Well, I don't have a message to his wife. I mean, look, I just disagree with the idea that he hasn't been offered due process. He had a couple of immigration hearings. He had a valid deportation order. I think this idea that somehow that we couldn't deport an MS-13 gang member, and he was an MS-13 gang member, is preposterous. And I think there's actually a deeper issue going on, which is that you see some radical judges at the district court level who are trying to layer so much quote-unquote process on top of the immigration system that it makes it impossible to function. We have over 20 million illegal aliens in the United States of America. Are we not allowed to deport them? Because if we're not allowed to deport them, then what these district courts are saying is fundamentally they reject the will of the American people as it was expressed in November of 2024. We just reject that. I believe the American people elected President Trump to do many jobs, but perhaps the most important job was to bring down the number of illegal immigration in this country.
That is going to be an effective message, because now you basically have the Trump administration fighting with ages of bureaucracy, not with the Democrats. So you actually have kind of a battle right now in this country between two halves. One half is the more corporatist Bushian Republican Party, and then you have the more populist wing of the right. That brings us to a lawsuit. We'll check it out. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Well, the Democratic National Committee has a couple of problems. And it appears that when you have problems, you make bad decisions. And to talk about perhaps some of those bad decisions, we've brought on the only Chip Rogers over from Americans for Fair Treatment. Thanks for joining us, Chip.
Yeah, so glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's not skip any of the pretense stuff. What's going on at the DNC and what do you guys have to do with it?
Well, we got to go back a little bit in time. The DNC forever has been pestering and criticizing and going after private sector employers over union issues and supporting all sorts of lawsuits and things that really pester and hamper these private sector companies, even when they face tough economic times and they have to let some employees go.
The only reason that you're not, setting up a union in your small cake shop is because you hate your laborers. You want to treat them like slaves. All that classic DNC line. I've heard it a million times.
That's the nonsense that they've been peddling for quite some time. But now they face a situation themselves where they did exactly the same thing. In fact, even worse than most private sector employers. So,
share.
Yes, here's the situation. A couple of years ago, the employees at the Democratic National Committee decided that they wanted to unionize. And of course, the DNC supported this idea, at least publicly. Well, after having a record-breaking last couple of years leading up to the elections, they decided to fire almost all of those employees and give them 1 day notice with no severance whatsoever. Now, had the private sector industry, anyone in private sector industry, had they done this, labor unions, the DNC would have been going after them. But now the DNC has done it to their own union members.
So what you're saying is the DNC played stupid games and they might be about to win a very stupid prize. Is that about right?
Well, look, the reality is this, is they had to face the economics of losing a national election. Right. And when that happens, when you run an election, you lose, some of the resources begin to dry up. They looked at that and realized we can't have all these people employed because we're kind of going under. And so what they did is they just got rid of all of them. Now, that's understandable in any real world situation, but because the laws are the way the laws are, you've got to give them notice. You've got to jump through a lot of hoops that have been put in place for employers, and the DNC, being as hypocritical as they could be, didn't do any of that. Again, 1 day notice, no severance.
So we're in a situation in which the party that said this is really good for the goose. Everybody, we've got to get this out there. This is something really good for the goose. Unionization, we've got to have all of these rules and policies so that you can't, fire anyone. You got to give them all of this advance notice, and you got to maybe in some states reasonable cause and severance and all this other stuff. But then when it's time for the gander also to receive the same treatment, well, all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute. I mean, we lost an election. What more do you want? Well, that would be to follow the rules that you pushed for, as you said, decades and decades.
Exactly. And they're facing the reality that businesses all across this country face in tough economic times. And that is when you run out of money and you can't pay employees, what do you do? I mean, we never want to get in that situation, but it does occur from time to time. And the DNC has been pushing policies for decades to make it almost impossible for these private sector companies to respond in tough economic conditions. But when it happens to them, they respond in the most brutal way. And of course, the union, rightfully so, is quite upset about this.
So this is one of the things I want to ask you, and just to go ahead and get the very last analogy or metaphor that I can use. The taste of their own medicine is, in fact, very bitter. I don't think I have any more analogies, stacked up back in the brain, but we'll see. This lawsuit could theoretically become a rather major scandal, not just in the public sphere, but also in the courts. Where do you expect this lawsuit to develop to? I mean, is this going to try to be shuttled away quietly, or is this going to be kind of a large courtroom battle? What are you looking for here?
Well, it's before the National Labor Relations Board, and of course, those things can happen quickly. They can take quite some time, but I will tell you this, it's not the same National Labor Relations Board they thought they were going to have to deal with. Obviously, it has changed since the election, so we'll see what the NLRB wants to do. I certainly don't want to put anything out there that would suggest one way or the other how they should act. We trust that they'll make the right decision. But the reality is in the National Labor Relations Board, under both Republican and Democratic control for years, have very much frowned on activities like this when you just wipe away all your employees, no notice, no severance. And so we'll see how they react to this one.
Is there something the DNC, I mean, they're facing scandal upon scandal upon scandal right now, with Vice Chair David Hogg rushing to throw $20 million at these incumbent races that he doesn't want the incumbents sticking around for anymore, and then being given an ultimatum by the DNC. There's a lot of scandal that's currently in the works over on that particular organizational table. But, oftentimes when there's a lawsuit that's brought up, there's a very simple thing one can do to kind of make it go away. And that, takes several different forms, given, if they could, accede to some requests. What are the requests on the table here for the plaintiffs?
Well, we'll see what the NLRB rules first. I mean, that's the first step in this. But I would say this. You point out another level of hypocrisy here. You've got this young man who came to fame under some terrible circumstances, but really, as you have seen unfold over the last few weeks, is not ready for prime time, out there suggesting he's going to use $20 million of the DNC money to go after other Democrats. Look, if they've got $20 million laying around, maybe one way to get this complaint to go away is to go back to those poor DNC workers that were fired and pay them at least some severance. If they've got $20 million extra dollars, they can give it to some of the people who were probably working for pennies to begin with. I mean, you know how it is working the political world. You don't work for a lot of money. You work for a cause. They didn't even get any severance.
Does it perhaps say anything about the DNC itself to espouse such values about being for the common worker and then, paying their workers basically a wooden cent piece?
Well, it nullifies the kind of that high level that they always used to take, the righteousness,
high horse, yeah.
The self-righteousness that they pronounced over the quote working class, which they've lost a lot of that over the last few elections. And this just furthers that. It just shows that, it's a lot of talk, no action. Again, 1 day notice, no severance, and now they have, the DNC vice chair talking about spending $20 million against their own sitting Democrat incumbents, which, I've been involved in politics for years. Usually you don't use money that's given to the party to go after other members of the party, especially when you've got poor people that got laid off that didn't get anything.
And that's one of the things that I'm looking for here, because what we've seen after the election is a lot of kind of rogue operators that have started going out on the left and just kind of wreaking havoc, turning over a lot of tables, exposing a lot of things under some logs, maybe like the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental state, maybe cover-up of perhaps some of the actions of organizations like Act Blue. Do you see the DNC leadership maybe a little bit nervous about the consequences of, just giving everyone the pink slip up front, that maybe they might have opened themselves up to a leak here or there, or, perhaps some unsavory information coming out before the public?
Yeah, look, I think the quickest way to lose your donors for any cause is to be shown as a hypocrite, right? And so it's not just the DNC. The RNC, I'm sure, has had challenges in the past. Any cause that people are involved with, if you come out and you're very hypocritical of the things you say you stand for, well, then that money is going to dry up. And I think that's probably the one thing that they're most worried about, and why they probably don't like this story, is because it shows that they weren't really for the working person at all. They weren't for supporting the unions at all, because look at the behavior when given the opportunity to do the right thing. And then, as you pointed out, and we've mentioned a couple of times here, to layer on top of that, apparently they've got $20 million extra sitting around already to attack themselves. So why not give it to those poor workers? And see, this is the type of hypocrisy that the average donor, the Act Blue donor, the big donors look at and say, I can't continue to financially support that. And so I think that's the real risk they run.
And I think that part of that risk comes in groups that you referenced maybe obliquely, for example, at least in my mind, like the UAW. When I'm looking at like the Teamsters, I'm looking at the union heads who, like Sean Fain, for instance, who had put a lot of support behind the Democrat Party, who had put a lot of money behind the efforts to elect blue members of the House, the Senate, state legislatures, governor's races. And now all of a sudden he's and other union leaders around the country are sitting back and watching, again, what they very openly in public criticize, higher ups, administration individuals in the company, in the organization, that are throwing around money so casually. And I do wonder, especially given Trump's kind of a big tent approach to his campaign, if you might actually start to see some unions just kind of forego donations until the DNC makes this right. And that's a stubborn group of people. To make something right in the political world requires a lot more humility than is usually sitting on reserve.
Well, you make a good point that's quite historically accurate. I would say this, at Americans for Fair Treatment, which is the organization I run, we focus on public sector unions. And one of the things we talk about a lot is what this subject matter, which is why is money being taken in the form of union dues and being given for political purposes to begin with? And so when you see this type of hypocrisy, both with the layoffs, the lack of a severance, and now the $20 million that allegedly might be used to go against other members of your own party, you have to begin to wonder, why are those union members having money taken out of their pocket and then being used for political activity that they may have no interest in supporting whatsoever?
When I was a teacher, we saw this in the teachers' unions all the time. Yeah. One of the reasons that I didn't spend $1,000 of my own money a year to be part of the ISTA in Indiana was because I didn't want to see $1,000 of my own cash going to political causes that were advocating directly against me. That was silly.
Yeah, I mean, think about your life as a teacher and the one that most teachers face. My mother's a retired public school teacher, and you don't get paid much because you're doing a public service. You really ought to be probably paid a heck of a lot more. You're making a very positive impact on society. We thank you for all that. But now we're going to have a teachers union come in, take your money from you, and then give it to a cause that you don't even believe in. Or if you believe in them, in this particular case, now they're full of hypocrites. And so this is why we need to get union money out of politics.
I think you're pretty dead on there. And I'm looking forward to seeing, obviously, the developments in this particular lawsuit. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how the country's psyche on the relationship between unions, as well as the kind of open political organizational structures change over the next couple of years, because I do think times are changing in that way. Chip Rogers, CEO over at Americans for Fair Treatment. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Awful tweets, the ones that no one ever deletes. Awful tweets on the Tony Kinnett Show.
On 93 WIPC.
Awful tweets. Y'all have sent in some really horrible social media posts this week. I mean, just some real stinkers that I've never quite seen before. Kylan, do we have Jerry Lopez, the one, the only Indy Spanglish, over on the line?
We sure do, the one and only.
I might be a little biased, Tony, but it's my favorite day of the week.
So we've got some really awful social media posts, because the reason that the left has just completely screwed the pooch on the window to fight Donald Trump does in fact come down to communication as well. But we're going to start off with some really low-hanging fruit, Jerry. We've got you a stellar one right off the bat here. So remember how people suggested a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a bad idea to finance your DoorDash order with Klarna?
Yeah.
They announced they were going to do that. So there is a tweet sent out by this person named Ducky, and they have a transgender flag. So we're already firing on all cylinders. And it says, third payment received. Your payment of $70 for United Airlines. Final payment received, $27.50 for Dice. $17.72 for Lyft, $10.96 for Uber, $7.54 for United Airlines. It's just all of these notifications of you owe money and now it's being taken out. How did they not see this coming?
Yeah, big surprise there, right? But you're talking about a group of people who think we're supposed to pay their student loans. So maybe they actually think that somebody else is going to pay these. I think the funny part, looking at the tweet, they said slow down, like they didn't turn the notification on.
I mean, it's really sad to see the consequences of one's own actions come to haunt them. The next one is just as fantastic. So this is an article that was sent over to us, and this tweet by Benjamin Rodhove is just a great way to describe it. This isn't the awful part of the tweet. The Daily Beast pointed out, remember when J.D. Vance went to Italy, and visited the Sistine Chapel and, was accused of killing the Pope? So J.D. Vance.
Yeah, big no-no.
There's a picture of him in the Sistine Chapel, right? Beautiful architecture, incredible. And phenomenal. And people lost their minds and said, there's no photography in the Sistine Chapel. It's against your rules. And the reason that rule's there is because, no flash photography, flashes from cameras can ruin some of the oils in the paint. It turns out that 14 paragraphs into the article whining about J.D. Vance getting a picture taken inside the Sistine Chapel, the Vatican gave him permission to take pictures.
Yeah, I think the more jarring part of this is even the Daily Beast knows that they can hide the truth inside the article. Most people are not going to read it at all. And unfortunately, in a time like today where most people are just looking at the highlights or the article title, it's more important than anything to click in the article and just read it, because we're seeing this pretty occasionally where the headline is completely misrepresented.
So this is a personal favorite. You're talking about headlines, right? And actually reading the whole thing. So NBC News, bastion of journalistic integrity, they said new images could change cancer diagnostics, but Immigration Customs Enforcement detained the Harvard scientist who analyzes them. And, Emily Galvin Almanza's like, good job, Team America. You're hurting kids with cancer. Jerry, do you know what?
We have one guy who happens to be an illegal immigrant that is able to come in and do this. No, let's just be real. If anything, he worked on a team, and maybe he was one. Is this a man from Maryland? Was he also a Harvard professor?
No, this is a lady, and in fact, it's not just that she didn't have her citizenship papers in order. She was detained because she tried to smuggle illegal things into the United States, and then she lied to customs about it. Amazing, yeah. That's not in the headline.
You won't find that in the article, Tony. You won't find that in the article.
No, God forbid. It's like, well, they arrested that poor father after, he robbed 3 stores and blew up half a city block. We're going to leave that out of there. Not necessary for journalism right there. This next tweet's from the Democrats, so it's going to be bad. Trump's White House is using 30,000 real eggs worth over $15,500 for their Easter egg roll. Meanwhile, Americans dyed potatoes instead of eggs this Easter to save money. Please explain this one to me.
I mean, a couple things, right? So are they saying that eggs cost by themselves like $1.75 an egg?
I just want to. I guess that appears to be the math here.
But who's dyeing potatoes, Tony?
Yeah, that was the other question I had.
I've never seen anybody dye a potato in my life.
It's an Irish tradition. We get all the potatoes and we dunk them in the dye and we send them out for all the kids to enjoy. And if they're very good, they won't die of the famine this year. Oh my gosh. Amazing tweets from the Democrat. Again, I can't believe that they flubbed the opportunities they had. Couldn't tell you why. I too am shocked. This next one though, it's a picture and I sent it to you this afternoon. It is a pickup truck, Toyota Tacoma. I like the Tacoma. I do. I think I like the Helix a little better, but we're not allowed to have that in the United States. We only sell those to the Taliban. So the Toyota Tacoma in this photo has a couple of bumper stickers. And one of the bumper stickers, I BS you not, to quote you, says, quote, make assassinations great again. Oh my.
Yeah, that's a little extreme, man. I mean, mental illness is real. You know what I mean? Like, as much as we didn't like Joe Biden, I don't think anybody openly called for his assassination, which is crazy. But I just zoomed in because I wanted to read this other one. It says, trans people existing does nothing negative to your life, you crybaby bee. And I would like to refer you to every manifesto that any one of these people have written. And it seems like we're under attack by a specific group of people, if we just want to keep it honest. So, yeah, they add a lot of negative stuff sometimes.
Well, Jerry, maybe at a time like this, what you need are some inspirational quotes. And there are a couple of social media accounts that I follow that I enjoyed because for a long time, the people that they were quoting are either passed away or they don't have social media. One of these guys is Thomas Sowell, famous philosopher, brilliant economic mind. The dude's a powerhouse.
Love his quotes, full of good ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Thomas Sowell quotes account, I don't know what happened to it. I guess they sold out. They are posting thirst trap videos of White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt working out. And so I have a question, Jerry. Do you remember when Thomas Sowell, one of his famous quotes is, Carolyn Leavitt gives a look into how she stays in shape. A classic.
Listen, I bet this tweet got a whole lot of views, right? And I'm not
a whole lot of cash.
Upset.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not upset. She's assembled very well, but she gives us a look at how she stays in shape by working out.
She's
the same as millions of people around the country.
She's assembled very well. We're gonna add that one to the vernacular. All right, last one here. This is from Amy McGrath, who is very angry because Secretary Hegseth, he has canceled a lot of climate change initiatives with the United States Navy, which, by the way, they didn't do anything except hamper the ability of U.S. naval officers in development to keep our sailors safe. So these climate change things actually put U.S. troops, specifically Marines and sailors, in constant danger. But he cancels them. And so here's what her response is. Again, this is Amy McGrath of Kentucky. It's incredible. Sure, let's not plan for the rising sea levels that will impact all of our East Coast Navy bases, including Norfolk and Annapolis. You guys are so smart.
Right. Well, anytime it gets into climate change, I just have one question. If it was such a big deal, right? AOC, according to AOC, we're supposed to be underwater 10 years ago, okay? But if this is such a big deal, why would Barack Obama buy a mansion on the edge of Martha's Vineyard, which technically by their own equation should be gone in 10 years? Why do they keep moving to the coast if it's going to be underwater, dude?
I have often wondered that. I do want to point out two small things that I find as possible plot holes in the expert intelligence of Amy McGrath of Kentucky, known coastal state Kentucky. How many times as a child I would go to the beaches of the Atlantic or the Gulf of America in Kentucky. Anywho, when she's not slurping trash-filled water next to Louisville, I would like to point out, number one, I don't think the Navy's really worried about more water. I don't know if you know this about boats, Jerry. Boats are typically quite fond of water. Not as much of ice. Shout out to the Titanic.
Listen, Tony, as a Cuban, I might not know about boats, but I'm very comfortable with rafts, and it's along the same lines. We're very comfortable around water.
Also, have you seen the time stamp photos? They have like a picture of, for example, Ellis Island in New York, and it's every year.
Oh, yeah.
And the water level is not actually getting any higher. Apparently, again, I'm told that in 100 years, oh man, it's going to be hot water everywhere, and Wally's going to be running around, like digging trash.
When they start buying vacations home in the Midwest, then we take it serious, Tony.
I'm telling you what, man, the beaches of Kentucky, they're coming, and they're not
soon.
Producer Nick says Waterworld is a documentary. We just didn't know it. Jerry Lopez, awful tweets. Thanks for another great week of these, man. We'll catch you real soon.
Awesome. See you next week.
Radio crew will catch you in a second. Live stream crew, we've got to talk about something disturbing. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. All right. I was not expecting. Who am I kidding? Of course I was expecting this. The outrage that is just consistent over some of the silliest mid-portion policy decisions continues to confuse me. So there's this class of people who are on Twitter all day, and they're on social media all day. And in this amount of time that they're spending, they are every kind of expert you could ever want. It's really quite fascinating. And this is where all the outrage comes from. So they're foreign policy experts, they're war plan experts, they're tech innovators. They know every law and its application, doesn't matter what they've ever studied. They're theologians. And my favorite, they're also economists and master diplomatic strategists. And this is true in two particular international incidents going on right now. One, of course, is the Russo-Ukraine War and the negotiations, which are somewhat in process to stop it. And number two, the escalating situation between India and Pakistan. So India and Pakistan have one great thing in common. They are both very unstable nuclear powers who despise each other. And that's been a thing for quite some time. But Pakistan has a problem. And can you get what that problem is? Can you figure it out? Oh, that's right. It's radical Islamists. Oh, I too am shocked. And so the radical Islamists inside Pakistan, they like doing this thing where they go over the border to a country that is not majority Muslim. And then they do a lot of raping and murdering because, the caliphate dies hard, I guess. And so these particular Shia fundamentalists have caused a lot of problems. Now, where is there another group of Islamic terrorists that crossed borders and committed a massive atrocity? Oh, that's right. Hamas with October 7th in Israel. And you already see the same folks who are in favor of Hamas and in favor of the Iranian regime, which, you know, one of the national Olympic sports that the Iranian regime participates in is the oppression of women on a physical level. You know, number 2 in the slot, of course, is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And, you know, if you're going to look at the Iranian situation and the Hamas situation, immediately moving over to praising Pakistan for the terror attacks, which is what's currently going on, and criticize India for now shutting part of its border with Pakistan and now ordering certain classes of Pakistani nationals out of the country as though this is somehow some sort of a terrible bad thing. I'm just not seeing the whole your borders have to stay open because you're a wealthier country. Why? Why do an amount of your citizens have to die because you can take it? That's ridiculous. And then on the other side of the foreign policy experts, we have people who believe that, and Donald Trump is not innocent of this because he did suggest, again, you know, in a rather, in a rather excited fashion about Russia and Ukraine. We'll have to touch on that in a second. It's time for some quick news reactions. We'll be back in a second. Got to pick up the radio crew.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Sorry to those out there on the radio side of things this evening. There's just so much news that is constantly breaking that my beautiful, riddled ADHD mind is bouncing like a gumball inside the back of a pickup truck. Not a great analogy, but I'm a little scatterbrained as a result of the news that breaks every 13 seconds. And so coming in and out of commercials, sorry for a bit of the jolting, especially to producer Kylan over in Indianapolis this evening. I'm so sorry. This is not exactly how I planned on certain things going, but I've got good news. And the good news is that we were told that Donald Trump needed to come out and basically backhand Vladimir Putin. And that he was never going to do so because Putin was like ventriloquist. He was like Jeff Dunham. And Trump was, you know, Walter, the puppet, I guess. And, you know, Putin was walking around and making Trump say and do whatever he wanted because, you know, that was his plan to conquer Ukraine. No, Trump came in and agreed to act as the negotiator. And I want to make this, you know, explicitly clear. The arguments that were made in favor of the Trump administration from a long-term policy from individuals on the right who said, well, you know, Ukraine did start the war and he is totally at fault, completely failed to see what Trump was doing. And I mean that. That's not a 4D chess move either. Donald Trump negotiates the exact same way every single time because what you're seeing today is whiplash, and it's really funny. So, the other day, Trump put out a post on Truth Social, as is his wont, saying Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. Trump then says the statement's very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama and is not even a point of discussion. So he criticizes Ukraine for not coming to the table a little bit. And this has happened quite a bit. And people are saying, oh, this is because, you know, Trump hates Ukraine and wants Russia to win. No. Some people have said, well, this is because Trump realizes that Zelensky and all of Ukraine are incredibly corrupt and they're trying to keep us in this forever war, so Zelensky never has to be reelected. No, not the case either. The truth of the matter is, Donald Trump, when he acts as the mediator, insults both sides based on whom he believes has the cards present. Up until this point, Russia has had no reason to come to the table. And Trump, with Steve Witkoff and with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, finally got Russia into a kind of a position where Russia agreed. There's a little bit of speculation on this part. I should argue that whether or not the Trump administration had anything to do with suggesting Putin at least show he could do a temporary ceasefire over Easter. That, again, that's for the actual foreign policy analysts over at the Pentagon to figure out. But in the meantime, I was promised that there was some master plan, you know, at hand here to force Zelensky to the table and that he wasn't actually at the table. And then Putin threw a North Korean model ballistic missile through a residential building I believe last night. And Trump is very, very, very unhappy with it. He talks about being, really disgusted. He says, I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary. Very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. Okay, let's talk about negotiation with Trump in a quick lesson here. Number one, Trump always makes a big announcement. Trump always assumes the deal is already done. It's a negotiation tactic. You assume that it goes through. It's, again, I'm not telling you anything new here. He does the exact same thing every time. Whether we're talking about Trump pushing forward a new thing that he wants to conjure out of thin air that hasn't been done before, or if he's playing a negotiator in a multilateral treaty or conflict, he does the exact same things. So, after Trump makes the big announcement that the deal is going to get done, if things aren't going well, the very first thing Donald Trump does is he acts nonchalant. It's a classic businessman strategy. I mean, I worked sales for a short amount of time because I was in kind of like a weird time lapse between two teaching jobs, one where I was at and one where I was moving. And you learned all of these basic strategies. You act nonchalant. Well, maybe we won't lock in on the deal. Maybe we will. You show disinterest and it makes the other side suggest, they might lose the deal entirely. Trump acts nonchalant. If that doesn't go well, Trump gets pissed. That's what you're seeing right now. It is. That is, in fact, what you're seeing right now. The problem is Vladimir Putin's been riding Donald Trump out because he thinks that Donald Trump's never actually going to be able to deliver any kind of a negative impact towards Russia. Now, there are isolationists in the U.S. who are terrified of Trump ever saying a mean thing to Putin because they think that means that Putin's going to immediately nuke half the world. I don't know where your evidence for that is whatsoever. I hear it. No, I don't think we should flirt with nuclear war and stick NATO bases right along the Russian border. No. And the Trump administration hasn't suggested such. But if Trump is going to begin bringing this war to an end, then the Steve Witkoff endless kind of butt-kissing approach that Trump was told is effective needs to not be a thing. And it appears at the present time that the Trump administration is finally moving forward to saying, okay, fine, look, Zelensky has given the United States a lot of what it wants and is giving the United States a lot of things, in fact, what it wants. Now it's time for Putin to come to the table. It's the exact same negotiation strategy that has consistently come forward with. Now, I do want to make one small counterpoint where someone made the case, well, where does Trump have any business telling any other country what any country should do? He should put up or shut up. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have the United States effectively be the leader of the free world and therefore be responsible for doing all of these things that other countries want, and then simultaneously say the United States never gets to have what it wants. You can't have both. So in this case, why does Trump have the authority to tell Ukraine and Russia what to do? Because, number one, every single world economy is built on the United States. After World War II, the entire world economy was rebuilt by the U.S. Everyone who didn't rely on the U.S. either sat in poverty, that's where we get third world countries from, or sat in poverty, that's where we get second world countries from. The first world was rebuilt by the United States. So yeah, Americans have a right to tell other people what to do. They don't have to do that, but if they want things from us, and there's a lot of foreign aid, a lot of trade deals, a lot of military protection, so that other countries can spend on things not their military, yeah, the United States gets to make some demands. Number two, Ukraine, in this particular instance, really needs things from the U.S. They need things from Europe as well. Because the unfortunate fact of the matter is that Russia has attempted to conquer Ukraine, and they have failed, but they're regaining some steam. The drone warfare, which Ukraine initially used to defend its territory, has now been co-opted by Russia, and it's pretty effective. You say, well, I don't want it to be that way. I hate to tell you a little dirty secret about foreign policy over the last 2,000 years of history. That's every single foreign policy situation. It's not always clear-cut World War II good guys versus bad guys. It doesn't work like that. And so if the United States is going to actually put forward some type of diplomatic strategy to end a war, then number one, yes, Trump is allowed to make demands. And number two, it's not going to happen overnight. And I, by the way, think that Trump was wrong for making that promise during the campaign, but Trump is naturally hyperbolistic. That's what he does. That's why people haven't really held him to that. Trump naturally gets out there, we're going to conquer Greenland, and Canada's going to be the 51st state, and I'm going to put up 2 large car dealership flagpoles on each side of the White House, maybe even a football field. And like that's just Trump. That's what he does to gin up excitement. So the issue at hand here is a lot of people who suggest that they want foreign policy to be done in a way that isn't snap your fingers and get it done, but they are then upset when that isn't the way the world works and the Trump administration doesn't bring their imagination into being or the opposite of it. And that's going to be a consistent issue for the next couple of months. We're going to be back on the radio soon. We'll be on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, over to a few quick news reactions this evening. Pushing the foreign policy stuff out of the way. I got to be real with you. You don't need more reasons to articulate why the left has 120% abandoned any chance at being effective. As I've said before, right now you have basically a country divided between the Republican populists and then you have kind of the Bushian establishment Republicans, or kind of the establishment group in general that has been harboring the bureaucracy over the last couple of decades, and the populists who want to tear everything down with a sledgehammer. And then you have traditional conservatives who are really in the middle, believe it or not, libertarians kind of in the middle, and that's where the discourse is happening as to where the country goes right now. And of course, the Trump administration fighting with the bureaucracy, that's the other battle. The Democrats aren't fighting with anyone but themselves. And the question that I'm asked most consistently, the question I'm seeing for almost any politician or pundit or analyst or news anchor or whatever asked is, are the Democrats going to be able to get it together? Are they going to be able to pull themselves together before we get to the midterm? And right now, my answer is, from all available data, nope. Anytime they have a Democrat moderate that comes out, they get smacked down. And I'm talking smacked down by Mike Tyson. And it's not pretty. And then the Democrats aren't doing themselves any favors. So the far to the left and the further to the left end up coming out to talk. So here's ex-Biden advisor Alencia Johnson, who, again, just doubling, tripling down on the very things that were, what would you say, referendum. What would be like the verb of referendum? Referended against in the last election. Here, check it out.
Until the Democratic Party, just as much as we understand that, Republicans subscribe to white supremacy, in the Democratic Party, there are folks that need to understand that their positions of privilege, that they need to get up out of their seats. A real leader understands when they are in the way of progress. And I think until we really reckon with that, we're going to continue to see this fighting, and we will continue to lose in ways that, quite frankly, are killing so many of our communities.
There you go. So the diagnosis as to why Democrats missed the window, well, because Republicans are white supremacists. That's the move, Chief. Hey, there you go. Because calling everything white supremacist works so well for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It worked so well in the last election. Yeah, try it again. Sure. Fantastic work there. The other amazing trend that is coming out of the left is the disconnect of the institutions now that the Trump administration is in charge, and people who the American people know, like RFK Jr., like Pete Hegseth, like Tulsi Gabbard, like Kristi Noem, like Doug Burgum, people who a lot of Americans know are in the secretary positions. You're starting to see the left disconnect from the institutions they swore they would never let go of. Here's a girl rejecting an internship from NASA. So I want to make this clear. She was offered a role at NASA, and she turned it down because Trump is in office right now. No one tells you how hard it is to reject an offer letter from your dream internship at NASA because of the current administration. And then it's just her shaking her head, because there's not really an argument you can make as to why she's being so retarded. But, I mean, there you go. For those who are wondering, the piano song is in the key of F sharp. That's about the only thing useful that came out of that particular one. This next clip is one I've seen quite a bit, but it really is endemic of not just the structural hypocrisy that we talked about with the Democrat lawsuit, but the cultural hypocrisy. Again, I've seen this video before. It's a phenomenal video, and it involves a guy going to a pride parade where there are a lot of people who call themselves the L, the G, the B, the T, the Q, the plus, the 2, the I, the A, the M, the S, the 13. It's all found at the local pride parade. And he goes up to a woman, and hilarity ensues, and she doesn't recognize the irony until it's a bit too late.
Beautiful trans women out here. Tell us about your transition, how it went.
Can I hold this, please?
No.
So I have a question for you. Why are you asking me those questions?
Like we're interviewing like trans women and stuff like that.
I'm not a trans woman.
Oh no, we're fully supportive. Do you want to talk?
I love that. I'm not a trans woman. I'm a whoops.
About sort of transitioning or anything like that, or like what people can.
I never transitioned because I was born a woman.
No, of course you're a woman. Of course.
Does it make a trans woman any less of a woman?
No, you are 100% a woman.
I'm not a trans woman.
Is there another definition that people like to use, or?
You thought I was a man?
I love it. I love it. It turns out once you are called a trans man or a trans woman, all of a sudden the knowledge of biology, which every person innately has, becomes real relevant real quick, doesn't it? Are they going to learn from those things in the next couple of months? Nope. Not even a little. This next one was sent. I think producer Nick found this one. There is one small thing I would like to let you know that is something I really enjoy about the openness of the Trump administration and the way press conferences are done. During the Biden administration, there was always a set time right at this exact moment. It was printed in the morning, the night before. You knew exactly when the press conferences were going to start. There were these pre-selected comms people that weren't cabinet secretaries, or they would just like walk up to the podium and they would just talk. You have no idea who this is. It's like some theater major from like northern Sacramento, and they would lecture everyone for a while and then they would leave. The Trump administration is basically Mad Max in a newsroom, and it's incredible. So Elizabeth Mitchell is our White House correspondent. I'm going to DC next week to kind of check in with the Daily Signal team. One of the things Elizabeth Mitchell has told me is that there are moments in which the White House calls a press conference over anything. Major move, judicial review, some secretary decides there's a new policy or regulation they're tearing out. Maybe Trump has just decided, I'm going to talk to everyone right now, bring them in, and a Diet Coke for all of us. And then all of a sudden, presto, it's press conference time. What this looks like for the press is a bunch of people in suits and carrying heavy camera and boom equipment. I mean, just booking it to the press conference room. And they're in heels and stilettos, some of the rookies. Really, you should be wearing sneakers. I'm told after a couple of weeks working in the press corps, you swap over to some sneakers. It's just good advice. In fact, I'm wearing sneakers right now, and there are no press conferences I'm running to from rural Indiana. Some habits die hard. The last one is, of course, Jasmine Crockett. What a blessing from on high. The last reason the left is not going to be able to recover from the window being shut, because now the window is shut, things are kind of locked in for them until they get another opportunity. And if you guys know how the Republican Party handles having the window closed on them, I mean, you better hope the president is dead or not conscious. Okay, with Biden, that was really unfair. That happened all the time. With Trump, it's really unlikely the window's going to open because his entire cabinet is kind of moderating and settling into a groove. They know what is not good now. And with the market going up and trade deals being made and certain leaks being ironed out, this ain't the first administration. Susie Wiles is the chief of staff. She's a wolf. She does not take any kind of nonsense lightly. I love this last clip, though. What do the Democrats have? Who are they ponying up? That's right, boys, girls, and squirrels. It's more Jasmine Crockett of Dallas.
I want y'all to know that every day that I walk in those halls, regardless of whatever rhetoric they put out about me, I am a very serious lawmaker.
Ah, yes. Nothing says I'm a serious lawmaker like wearing the blue sleep pajamas from How I Met Your Mother. Nothing says I'm a serious lawmaker like wearing a baggy turtleneck and what appears to be a suit made out of Sorcerer Mickey Mouse's hat. I'm not necessarily sure what is a serious lawmaker about screaming racial epithets and trying to pick a fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is a serious lawmaker, but anywho, she's vamping. Let her vamp.
At the same time,
the half-hearted applause because no one believes that she's serious.
if you try me, you will find out.
Ah, yes, there we go. I'm a serious lawmaker, and if you try me, you're going to find out real quick. She's never talked like that before she actually made it to the House. She had such a posh and sophisticated accent when she'd go do interviews. And now she's like trying to parrot lines from Friday, which is, by the way, extremely insulting to people who are, in fact, from the inner cities of the United States. Because, again, I don't know if, for those who haven't been in an inner city before, it so happens that different inner cities have different inner city accents. And her doing her best impressions of Kid Rock on stage, I don't know, man.
I am truly a black woman at the same time. So.
Ah, yes, in this life, you're either a professional lawmaker or you're a black woman. Now that's a thing to say. My God. I'm a professional lawmaker, but at the same time, as in contrary, I'm also a black woman. What? I would love to see her in a room with Condoleezza Rice, who especially despised the younger black women stereotyping themselves in order to like try to get in with the in crowd. She despised that. Amazing moves. So, right now, the Democrat Party has had the door slammed on them. They've slammed it on themselves. Their own employees or former employees are suing themselves. You've got some representatives down in El Salvador who are saying they're not going to leave. You've got AOC running around the country with Bernie Sanders talking about fighting the oligarchy and flying in private jets because that's what you do when you want to fight the rich government officials as you fly around in private jets all the time. And then you've got, who else do they have? Michelle Obama, black woman can't express pain. Yep. This is incredible. What a magical time to be alive. And we're going to continue bringing you the latest and the greatest, and yeah, that includes the worst of everything. We'll be back tomorrow for one final show before the weekend. I'm Tony Kinnett. This has been the Tony Kinnett Cast, nationally syndicated from the Daily Signal and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.